Scattered across 17,000 islands, like emeralds thrown across sapphire seas, Indonesia holds within its vast archipelago some of humanity's most remarkable stories. From mist-wrapped highlands to jungle canopies that touch the clouds, from coral atolls to volcanic peaks, these islands cradle peoples who have shaped their lives around the rhythms of monsoon and tide, forest and flame. These are communities that carved civilizations from wilderness, turned isolation into strength, and made homes in places where others see only obstacles. Here live the tattooed shamans who speak to forest spirits, the boat builders whose vessels dance with typhoons, the tree dwellers who make their homes above the jungle floor, and the sea nomads who know every current and coral from memory passed down through generations. Mentawai. Our journey drifts west to the crashing surf of Sumatra's wild frontier. Here, where the Indian Ocean hurls itself against primeval shores, the Mentawai people emerge from jungles so thick that sunlight filters down only in scattered coins of gold. These are not the manicured tropics of tourist brochures, but something older, wilder. Islands where ancient trees grow so tall they seem to hold up the sky itself, where rivers run dark as coffee, and where every shadow might hide spirits older than memory. The Mentawai wake to dawn choruses of gibbons, whose calls echo through canopies that have never known the bite of chainsaws. Their longhouses rise on stilts above forest floors, carpeted with leaves that have been falling for millennia. Wooden palaces carved from ironwood trees that took centuries to grow. Extended families gather around fires that have been burning for generations, the smoke carrying prayers upward through gaps in thatch roofs toward ancestors who dwell in the highest branches. But it is on their skin that the Mentawai write their deepest stories. The sikatet, traditional tattoos, cover their bodies like living manuscripts, each line and curve a chapter in personal and tribal history. Young people endure days of tapping needles made from guitar strings, their skin becoming canvases for designs that speak of clan totems, spiritual protections, and connections to the forest that flows through their blood like sap through trees. Their shamans, the sikere, journey between worlds as easily as stepping between shadows and sunlight. They read omens in the flight patterns of hornbills, commune with spirits that dwell in strangler figs, and heal with plants that grow in clearings known only to initiates. For them, the forest is not wilderness, but home. Each tree a relative, each stream a conversation partner in the endless dialogue between human and nature. The outside world has arrived on their shores with speedboats and smartphones, bringing young Mentawai to cities where their tattoos mark them as curiosities rather than carriers of ancient wisdom. Missionaries have built churches in clearings where sacred stones once gathered moonlight. And tour operators promise visitors glimpses of primitive life packaged for modern consumption. Yet in the depths of Cyberroot, where rivers run untamed and the forest breathes with the rhythm of ages, the Mentawai remain what they have always been, the tattooed keepers of jungle mysteries, living libraries whose skin tells stories older than writing, proof that some wisdom can only be earned through generations of listening to the whispers of ancient trees. Toraja. From the steaming jungles of Sumatra, our path climbs eastward into the highlands of Sulawesi. Here, where volcanic peaks pierce clouds like fingers reaching for heaven, the Toraja people have built a civilization that treats death not as an ending, but as a doorway. Their villages perch on mountain ridges like ships adrift in seas of mist, their tonkanon houses rising with roofs that curve skyward like buffalo horns, or boats ready to carry souls into the afterlife. Dawn in Toraja land reveals rice terraces carved into mountainsides like staircases to paradise, each level catching different qualities of light as morning burns through the highland air. Water buffalo, massive patient creatures with horns that span arm lengths, graze on slopes so steep they seem to defy gravity, while coffee trees and clove gardens fill valleys with fragrances that drift upward like incense. But it is in their relationship with death that the Toraja reveal their deepest wisdom. When someone dies, they do not mourn, they celebrate. The deceased becomes Tomakala, to be made like, and their journey to Puya, the land of souls, begins with ceremonies that can last for days. Water buffalo are sacrificed in numbers that reflect the deceased's status, their souls sent ahead to carry the departed across the rivers of the afterlife. The Manene ceremony brings families together to tend their ancestors with tender devotion. They lift wooden Tautau effigies from cliff caves, dress them in new clothes, and walk them through villages where they once lived. These carved guardians watch over valleys from their stone balconies, their eyes following the seasons as rice grows and harvests come, eternal witnesses to the rhythms of life continuing below. Their Aluk religion weaves Christianity with beliefs older than memory, creating tapestries of faith where Jesus walks alongside ancestral spirits, and church bells ring over villages where megalithic stones still mark sacred spaces. Traditional priests read omens in the entrails of sacrificed pigs, while Catholic masses echo from wooden churches, both seeking the same divine wisdom expressed through different rituals. Modern Indonesia has built roads up their mountains, bringing tourists with cameras and anthropologists with notebooks, turning sacred ceremonies into performances and traditions into attractions. Young Toraja migrate to cities where ancestor worship gives way to career worship, and where the elaborate death rites of home become expensive inconveniences rather than spiritual necessities. Yet in the highlands, where morning mist still wraps around Tongkonan houses and Tautau still guard valleys from their cliff caves, the Toraja continue their ancient dialogue with eternity. They are the people who turned grief into art, who made death a celebration, who understand that some journeys require the finest ceremonies and the strongest buffalo to carry souls across rivers that flow between worlds. Badui. Crossing from Sulawesi's misted peaks into the green heart of Java, we find a people who have chosen defiance as their destiny. Here, where ancient forests survive like islands of time, in an ocean of highways and skyscrapers, the Badui live by pikuku, sacred laws that reject the temptations of the modern world. Their villages rest in mountains that rise like green fists above the sprawl, places where electricity, engines, and cameras have no power, and where silence itself is guarded as a form of prayer. Their villages emerge from jungle trails like secrets shared only with the worthy, bamboo houses with thatched roofs clustering around clearings where children play games their great-grandparents would recognize instantly. No electricity brightens their nights, no motors disturb their silence, no cameras capture their faces. The Badui have looked at the modern world and chosen instead the wisdom of limitation, the strength found in saying no to progress that comes at the cost of spiritual purity. The inner Badui, the Badui Dalam, live under the strictest rules, their white clothing marking them as keepers of the most sacred traditions. They cannot use modern tools, cannot sleep outside their territory, cannot allow outsiders to photograph them or record their voices. Their every action is governed by ancestral law that sees the earth as sacred mother and modern technology as potential corruption of the divine harmony they guard. They practice humor, shifting cultivation that works with forest cycles rather than against them, burning clearings that regenerate stronger, planting rice varieties that have grown in Java for millennia. Their agricultural calendar follows not clocks, but the movements of stars and the subtle changes in wind patterns that tell initiated farmers when the earth is ready to receive seeds. The outer Badui, the Badui luar, serve as buffers between the sacred inner realm and the corrupting outside world. They wear blue and black, may use some modern conveniences, and interact with visitors who arrive seeking glimpses of life before electricity and engines. Yet even they live under restrictions that would seem impossible to most modern people, bound by traditions that see every innovation as a potential threat to cosmic balance. Asmat. And farther east, beyond Java's mountains and across seas that shimmer like hammered bronze, lies Papua, a land half dream, half drowned. In its swamplands, where mangrove roots clutch the earth and rivers coil like serpents of coffee-colored water, the Asmat carve their souls into wood. This is no ordinary landscape, but a shifting frontier between land and tide, where crocodiles bask beneath trees that grow straight from the swamp, and cassowaries crash through undergrowth like living relics of another age. The Asmat emerge from this amphibious world as master sculptors, their dugout canoes gliding through channels that serve as highways, their villages rising on stilts above waters that never truly recede. Every piece of wood in their world tells a story. Ancestor poles that tower 20 feet high, carved with figures stacked like generations climbing towards sky. War shields decorated with faces of enemies transformed into art, and ceremonial drums that thunder with voices of the dead. Their bispoles rise like wooden prayers toward canopies that filter sunlight into green-gold dreams. Each figure carved into the towering poles represents ancestors whose spirits live on in wood, their stories flowing through intricate patterns that only initiated carvers can read. The poles are not merely art, but vehicles for souls, ways of keeping the dead present in the world of the living, bridges between the visible and invisible realms. Young men earn their passage to adulthood through initiation rites that transform them into warriors and artists simultaneously. They learn to carve not just wood, but the stories that give wood meaning, understanding that every curl of shaving that falls from their adzes carries spiritual significance. The most sacred carvings can only be created by men who have proven themselves in battle, who understand that taking life and creating art are both forms of power that demand respect. Dani. And beyond the mangrove labyrinths of the Asmat, the land suddenly rises, mountains heaving skyward until rivers become waterfalls and clouds gather like veils over jagged ridges. Here lies the Baliem Valley, a green bowl cradled high in New Guinea's spine, where the Dani people live suspended between Stone Age and Space Age. At altitudes where sweet potato gardens cling to slopes like stairways for the spirits, the Dani have preserved lifeways that echo across thousands of years, a culture that feels less discovered than remembered. The Dani men still wear koteka, penis gourds that rise from their bodies like natural exclamation points, each one carved and shaped according to status, clan affiliation, and personal style. Women wrap themselves in grass skirts that rustle with each movement, their bodies adorned with pig grease that gleams in highland sunlight and protects against mountain cold that can surprise visitors accustomed to tropical heat. Their villages cluster in the valley bottom, where morning mist pools like water, circular compounds surrounded by sweet potato gardens that provide the foundation of highland Papua life. These humble tubers, grown in mounded beds that dot the landscape like geometric poetry, feed both people and the pigs that represent wealth, status, and spiritual power in Dani society. Pigs are not merely livestock, but partners in a complex social dance that determines marriages, settles disputes, and maintains the delicate balance between clans that share the valley. When conflicts arise, they are settled not through courts, but through elaborate gift exchanges, where pigs, cowrie shells, and bird of paradise feathers change hands according to protocols older than written law. The Dani understand war as both necessity and art form. Traditional battles follow rules more complex than chess, with opposing clans meeting in designated fighting grounds where warriors demonstrate courage through elaborate displays of bravery and tactical skill. Deaths are mourned by both sides, and conflicts pause for proper funeral rites before resuming according to schedules that honor both justice and ceremony. Korowai. From the low valleys of Papua, our journey rises into the clouds, where forests stretch so high they seem to press against the sky. Here, among the tallest trees on Earth, the Korowai people have built their civilization in the space between Earth and heaven. Their tree houses perch on platforms 40 meters above ground, connected by bridges that sway with wind and weighted with the footsteps of children who learn to walk on pathways suspended in air. This is not wilderness, but home. Forests so thick and green that ground level exists in perpetual twilight, while the canopy above bathes in sunlight that filters down through leaves like liquid gold. The Korowai move through this vertical world like three-dimensional beings, their entire universe organized around the understanding that safety, comfort, and spiritual power all increase with altitude. Their houses rise on poles cut from trees chosen not just for strength but for spiritual significance, each platform a small island floating in an ocean of leaves. Extended families gather around fires that burn safely above the forest floor. Smoke drifting upward through thatch that keeps rain out while letting forest breezes flow through. Children sleep in hammocks suspended above drops that would terrify ground-dwelling humans, yet here feel as natural as solid earth. They hunt with bows and arrows from platforms that give them clear shots at birds and mammals that never touch ground, their arrows flying through spaces between leaves toward targets that appear and vanish like forest spirits. Women tend gardens in clearings far below, climbing up and down rope ladders with loads of sago palm and sweet potato that feed families living closer to clouds than soil. The Korowai understand their forest as a community that includes not just humans, but all the spirits, animals, and plants that share their vertical realm. They read weather in the movements of leaves 40 meters above their heads, predict animal behavior by watching bird flights that happen at eye level, and communicate across distances through drumbeats and calls that carry better through canopy than ground. Bajau. Far from the rooted forests of Papua, the horizon opens into endless blue. Here, on waters that stretch farther than land can dream, live the Bajau, the ocean's eternal nomads. They are born where waves break and die, where tides fall, a people who have traded soil for salt and made the sea itself their homeland. Their leper boats rise and fall with swells, wooden vessels so perfectly adapted to ocean life that families spend months without touching solid ground. Children learn to swim before they walk, their lungs developing capacity to dive deep for fish and shells, while their eyes adapt to reading underwater landscapes. The Bajau understand the sea as farmers understand soil, reading its moods in the color of water, the pattern of waves, the behavior of birds. Their entire material culture floats, houses on stilts rising from shallow lagoons, boats lashed together to create temporary villages that drift with currents. Across the coral seas, where morning brings dolphins playing in boat wakes and evening finds families gathered on decks under guiding stars, the sea nomads endure, the people who turned ocean into home, water into wisdom. Dayak. Along the dark, winding rivers of Borneo, where hornbills cut the air with their wings and giant trees lean over waters stained the color of strong tea, the Dayak people have built a world that flows with the currents. Their lives stretch across the world's third largest island like the rivers themselves, endless, meandering, powerful. The rumah batang rise on ironwood posts as thick as telephone poles, structures so massive they seem to grow from the forest floor rather than being built upon it. Extended families live under single roofs that can stretch for hundreds of meters, their individual quarters opening onto shared verandas where children play and elders gather to share stories that flow like the rivers themselves, endless, meandering, full of hidden depths and sudden turns. Dayak men emerge from jungle paths with blowguns that fire darts tipped with poison derived from plants that grow in forest clearings known only to initiated hunters. Their accuracy with these weapons borders on the supernatural, silent darts, finding their targets through gaps in foliage that would challenge modern marksmen using telescopic sights. They hunt bearded pigs that crash through undergrowth like hairy locomotives and deer that ghost through shadows like forest spirits. Their boats, traditional kelatok carved from single trees, navigate rivers that serve as highways, postal systems, and meeting places simultaneously. Families travel for days along waterways that wind through forests so thick that sunlight reaches the water only in scattered coins, their vessels loaded with jungle produce, bound for markets in distant towns. The Dayak spiritual world pulses with the presence of ancestors and forest spirits that dwell in giant trees, sacred stones, and the rivers themselves. Their shamans journey to realms both physical and metaphysical, using rice wine and ritual dance to communicate with forces that control everything from weather patterns to the health of crops planted in clearings carved from virgin forest. Headhunting once defined Dayak warfare and spiritual practice, enemy skulls taken not from bloodlust, but from complex beliefs about soul power and cosmic balance. The trophy heads that hung from longhouse rafters were not symbols of conquest, but partners in ongoing relationships between the living and dead, their spirits incorporated into community life through ceremonies that honored both victor and victim. Modern Borneo has brought palm oil plantations and coal mines to forests that once stretched unbroken across the horizon, while logging operations have turned rivers into highways for massive logs floating toward mills that process ancient trees into paper and pulp. Some Dayak work in these industries, trading traditional forest knowledge for wages that buy manufactured goods and modern conveniences. Indonesian and Malaysian governments have built schools and clinics in remote areas, bringing education and healthcare to communities that once relied entirely on traditional knowledge and plant-based medicine. Young Dayak migrate to cities where longhouse life gives way to apartment living and river navigation becomes irrelevant in worlds built around automobiles and highways. Yet along remote rivers, where morning mist still rises from water that reflects ancient trees and hornbill calls still echo through forests that remember when the world was younger, the Dayak endure. They are the people who turned rivers into roads, forests into pharmacies, community into art form. They remain proof that human civilization can flourish in harmony with wilderness, rather than in opposition to it. Bugis. Across the turquoise waters of the Makassar Strait, the Bugis people have written their history in the wake of boats that dance with typhoons and navigate by wheeling stars. They are the master mariners of Southeast Asia, communities whose relationship with the ocean runs deeper than blood. Their pinisi boats rise from shipyards like wooden prayers, each vessel carved from tropical hardwoods according to designs passed down through generations. These boats are not merely transportation, but expressions of Bugis soul, floating sculptures that combine practical genius with aesthetic beauty. Bugis traders have carried spices, silk, and dreams across seas, connecting Indonesia to distant markets. Their boats arrive loaded with nutmeg from remote islands, coffee from highland plantations, and crafts from villages that exist only as coordinates in navigation songs. Across the waters of eastern Indonesia, where morning finds pinisi boats setting sail on ancient winds and evening brings them home to welcoming harbors, the maritime tradition endures, the people who turned ocean into highway, wind into currency. Alune. From storm-tossed seas and volcanic highlands, our journey drifts east to the spice-scented islands of Maluku. Here, in rainforests as deep as memory itself, the Alune people move through green cathedrals where every shadow holds spirits and every stream carries stories older than time. They practice sasi, traditional conservation that closes certain areas to human use until forest spirits signal that resources have recovered. This is spiritual ecology that sees humans as participants in forest life rather than its masters, temporary caretakers of abundance belonging to greater forces. Alune shamans journey between worlds through rituals blending Muslim prayers with animistic practices older than Islam's arrival. Their traditional medicine draws on rainforest pharmacopoeia, including hundreds of plants whose healing properties have been tested and refined through generations. In the depths of Maluku's remaining rainforests, where giant trees still stand like pillars supporting the sky, and morning brings calls of birds whose songs have never been recorded, the Alune persist, proof that human civilization can flourish through partnership with wilderness rather than domination of it. Rejang. High in the mountains of southern Sumatra, where coffee trees cling to impossible slopes and morning mist pools in valleys like liquid silver, the Rejang people have carved their civilization from highland wilderness that exists between earth and sky. Their villages perch on ridges emerging from cloud forest like islands in seas of green, traditional rumah rakit rising on stilts above ground that never truly dries. They practice ladang, shifting cultivation that works with mountain ecology, burning forest clearings that regenerates stronger after temporary human use. Rice grows on terraces, carved into mountainsides with unchanged techniques, each level catching rainwater and morning dew while preventing erosion. The Rejang spiritual world recognizes mountain spirits that control weather, fertility, and the success of crops planted in soil belonging ultimately to forces greater than human ownership. In the mountains, where morning mist still reveals coffee gardens floating in mid-air, and evening brings bird calls carrying across ancient valleys, the Rejang endure, the people who turned altitude into agriculture, steepness into strength. Minangkabau. Beyond rivers and spice forests, our journey climbs into the highland heart of West Sumatra. Here, where volcanic peaks rise like green pyramids above valleys carved by gods, the Minangkabau people have built a civilization that turns the world upside down. The Minangkabau understand property not as individual ownership, but as ancestral trust, land belonging to female lineages and passing from mothers to daughters in chains of inheritance stretching back to legendary queens. Men may hold political power, but women control the economic foundation that makes political authority possible. Young Minangkabau men practice merantau, traditional migration that sends them across Indonesia and Southeast Asia to seek fortunes before returning home with wealth and knowledge that enriches highland communities. This tradition has made the Minangkabau among Indonesia's most successful entrepreneurs. In the highlands, where volcanic peaks still pierce morning clouds and rumah gadang still rise like wooden prayers toward heaven, the Minangkabau endure, the people who made women the foundation of society, who turned migration into cultural strength, proving that some civilizations grow stronger through the journeys of their children rather than their staying home. If this journey through Indonesia's hidden peoples stirred your spirit, let the archipelago wines carry your support. Leave a like, share it with fellow explorers, and subscribe so you never miss the next expedition into these island worlds. Thank you for watching, and may the wisdom of the archipelago's guardians stay with you until we sail again.